Hi, folks. I'm here next to one of my apple trees because this week I made reference to the Antietam campaign in the East during the early part of the Civil War. And the location of Antietam and actually the later Gettysburg battle up in Maryland and along the southern fringes of Pennsylvania is a region that's covered by orchards. So there's lots of peach trees, plum trees, apple trees. So I'm here next to an apple tree. Someone asked me about something that I mentioned in my weekly announcement that General George McClellan had squandered at least 3 chances to defeat and destroy the Army of Northern Virginia during the Antietam campaign. And there actually may be more opportunities. Depends what you read, how this is all divided out. But this is an interesting example of the failure of Northern generals to take advantage of their superior size and resources, weaponry, during the early part of the Civil War in the East. George McClellan was the son of a wealthy Philadelphia doctor, and he's someone who has, as I mentioned, a Napoleonic size ego. And so McClellan had suffered reverses and retreat in the Peninsula campaign, but he gets this wonderful opportunity when Lee decides to invade the North to cross into Maryland. A copy of Lee's battlefield orders, his marching orders, were left along the side of a road where the Confederates had encamped, and a Union corporal and sergeant found this bundle which contained cigars, but the papers wrapped around these cigars were Lee's plans that showed exactly where his different divisions were marching. They revealed what roads they were on, what were their objectives, and they also showed that Lee had divided his army in a very risky manner. And so George McClellan had these papers in front of him within hours, and apparently he remarked that if he couldn't defeat Robert E. Lee with this material, that he was ready to go home. So he's basically saying, I have the solution to winning a victory and destroying the enemy. What follows then is a period of almost a day in which McClellan fails to move his army. Time is of the essence. The more hours that go by, the more that information on those papers will become obsolete. And there's also the danger that Lee will figure out the danger. And that's what happens. Lee realizes, actually there's an informant that tells the Confederates that the Yankees have these papers. And so then Lee is able to scramble to get at least a large portion of his army assembled together before they're destroyed in detail. That's the big risk, that you'll be attacked when your army is spread out, and the pieces then can be destroyed. And so Lee is still in a terrible situation. He's outnumbered nearly 3-1 at Antietam or Sharpsburg with the Potomac River to his back. In other words, if the battle goes poorly, it's hard to retreat. In other words, you're trapped. And so the Battle of Antietam opens up, and McClellan is going to squander an opportunity then to destroy this smaller army. During the battle, a lot of analysts say that Antietam is fought almost like 3 battles rather than 1. McClellan opens with an attack over on his right by General Joseph Hooker. That attack is fought to a bloody stalemate. And then when that's over with, the middle of the Union Army will advance under General Sumner and Mansfield. And there you fight to a bloody standstill. And then finally, later in the day, General Ambrose E. Burnside is sent on the attack. So the Union Army never uses its total strength to assault everywhere at once. And this allows the Confederates to move units around like firemen to put out the fires at different parts of the battlefield. So it's a big tactical mistake. Another mistake, a third mistake that's made, is that McClellan leaves a huge portion of his army as his reserve. These men are never engaged. They sit throughout the battle listening to the sound of the guns, but they're never sent in. So in other words, they might as well not have even been there. So you're artificially shrinking your army by a quarter or something like that by not deploying these men, by leaving them sitting in the rear. And then finally, after this cataclysmic day, this bloodiest single day in American history is over with, Lee's army has suffered a huge number of casualties. Like a third of the men are killed and wounded. And the Confederates stay in their position, but they're in a dire situation. And Lee does not retreat. He waits to see if McClellan has the nerve to do anything. And McClellan is dazed and traumatized by his losses, and the Union Army never attacks. And so Lee waits an entire day, even though he's risking everything by doing so. And when the Yankees simply stay where they're at and don't advance, then Lee goes ahead and retreats back to Virginia, which is what he needed to do. But there was still this opportunity. If McClellan had sent everything he had at the Army of Northern Virginia at that point, with the Potomac River actually running high, so the river was not easily fordable, that could have been the end for the Army of Northern Virginia. So you have all of these chances to basically win the war in the East, which might well have won the war overall ultimately. And George McClellan doesn't take advantage of any of them, and he makes these mistakes. And so finally, President Lincoln is really beside himself after the battle is over with. He urges McClellan to pursue, go after this damaged enemy. And McClellan sits on the Antietam battlefield and refuses to move for days and days. And ultimately, that's what's going to prompt Lincoln to fire McClellan basically for the second time. But the story of the war in the East is President Abraham Lincoln looking for a good general that has the right stuff, that has the willingness to fight and the ability to use the advantages that the North has to begin winning the war. So, hope you guys have had a great week. Enjoy your weekend, and I'll talk to you folks later.